Thank you, Ryan, so much for that introduction. And good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here to share about the White River Vision Plan. So when my mother found out that I was presenting this morning, she immediately started helping me and informing me what I should talk about. So she thought it was really important for you to know that my family settled on 500 acres on the White River in the mid-1700s. And I think you'll be really happy to know that I am not going to talk about my family today, but I did want to share some history with you about the White River. So let's just jump right on in. So Indianapolis was platted in 1821. It was really this small, sleepy city until the arrival of the railroad in 1847. And that's when our economy really took off, when we started becoming this industrialized city. And it was during this period of the city's early development, between the 1850s and the 1870s, that many factories and industrial businesses were encouraged, or even required, to be located on the White River. And it was actually the law that those companies dispose of their waste into the river. Well, by the 1880s, the White River was literally a dumping ground for industrial waste for factories and warehouses along the river, particularly from canneries and oil refineries, slaughterhouses, and meat packing plants. And while there weren't a lot of autopsies performed at Indianapolis' Central State Hospital, there were roughly around 2,000, there was even a drain that went from Central State's autopsy room into the White River. So by 1912, the White River was so polluted that the Indiana State Board of Health threatened a lawsuit against the city of Indianapolis if local officials didn't prevent the river from becoming a menace to public health and to property values. And by 1915, the pollution was so bad that the matter ended up at the State House. And there, a bill was passed that required cities that were using the White River for sewage disposal to install a sewer system and treatment plants. So this was also about the same time that George Kessler, who was Indianapolis' city planner and a landscape architect, that he was designing our parks and our boulevard system. And Kessler's grand vision was to create a connected park system that was linked by our key waterways. So, speaking of waterways, this leads me to trivia question number 1. Yes, we're having a little bit of trivia this morning. So, I'm so sorry. I apologize about that. So, tweet your answer to My White River, and the first person to correctly answer is going to win a White River swag bag that you can pick up actually after the event. So the question reads, how did the White River get its name? A, before Indianapolis' industrial development impacted the river, it contained numerous rapids. The river was named after the Whitewater Rapids. Or B, it was named after the early Indianapolis pioneer, James White, who claimed land and built a cabin along the river. Or C, the White River has an Indiana limestone base. The river's water was so clear that the limestone base made it appear white. Again, just tweet your answer. So prior to 1915, Indianapolis had a very primitive sewer system, and unfortunately, it was never completed, and it was actually already in a state of collapse. After the 1915 legislation, Indianapolis built its first true sewer system, which was a combined storm, so rainwater, and sanitary, when you flush your toilet. And much of that combined system still exists today. And over a century ago, when it was built, it was designed that when it overflowed, such as during heavy rains, that it would overflow into the White River. So fast forward throughout the decades, and there have thankfully been regulations passed to help improve water quality. One of the most significant pieces of legislation was the Clean Water Act that President Nixon signed in 1972. Which established regulations for pollutant discharges. So, for example, slaughterhouses could no longer dispose of animal organs and leftover carcasses into the White River. So those regulations, they were great for our country, But still not enough for Indianapolis, because we still had this problem of a combined sewer system that overflowed into the White River, until this happened. And this is the Citizens Energy Group Dig Indy Tunnel System, which is a 28-mile-long network of deep rock tunnels that's being built over 250 feet deep beneath our city. And with those improvements, also with our 2 wastewater treatment plants, this will reduce combined sewer overflows into our waterways by over 97% by 2025. And it's because, I know, it's amazing. And it's really because of this project why this plan is possible. And so for the first time in our city's history, we, as a community, have the opportunity to embrace the river like we never have before. For the first time in our city's existence, we can come together to envision the possibilities so that we can create an ecologically, economically, and culturally connected corridor that links our neighborhoods, our anchor institutions, and our destinations together for Central Indiana. This is our next Kessler plan. This is a plan for us, and it's a plan for the generations that will follow. So I'm sure that you probably know that we are certainly not the first city that has embraced and embarked upon some ambitious riverfront planning. Cities like Cincinnati and Nashville and Chicago and Columbus are already years ahead of us and have developed and reinvented portions of their riverfront. So now I'm gonna see if you guys were listening, because it's time for trivia question number 2. And the question reads, not quite a beach, but reminiscent of the calming sound waves provide, what is the name of the new development planned at the former GM stamping plant site? Again, please tweet your answers to My White River. So when Indianapolis and Hamilton County started to first discuss this plan, including potential boundaries and the scope of work, we decided, let's go big. That's fine if those other cities just wanted to focus on a portion of their riverfronts. But this is our plan, and we have an amazing opportunity to look at our river as a shared asset and a destination for our 2 counties. This plan encompasses 58 miles of the White River, from northern Hamilton County all the way to the southern border of Marion County. And when you think of the right bank and the left bank, that is 116 miles. This is currently the largest river planning effort in the United States, and it's the largest planning effort that the city of Indianapolis has embarked upon in the last century. Currently, we're about 2/3 of the way through with the plan, and community engagement and input has been a fundamental part of this process. It's incredibly important to capture the voices and the desires of what people want to see and experience along the river, and what they think that their children and their grandchildren might want to see. And through a wide variety of public engagement processes, we collectively developed an overarching vision as well as guiding principles to serve as our compass and to steer us through this process. And our vision reads, the White River is Central Indiana's next frontier, unifying and diverse, productive and protected, timeless and contemporary. The river sets us apart as communities that can work together to realize big dreams. Its healing power guides us towards a resilient future, supports healthy neighborhoods and economies, honors the past, and improves the lives of Hoosiers for generations to come. And these are our 9 guiding principles that we collectively developed, which address ecology, economy, humanity, and implementation. So I'm going to walk you through these as well as show you some examples just to give you some ideas. So the first principle is to restore the river's environment and ecology, to enhance its natural function, steward its diverse community of life, and adapt to a climate-resilient future. So this means restoring the ecology of the river, including the wetlands and the prairies, and working with adjacent landowners to reduce harmful runoff and erosion. But perhaps most important, it means working towards a free-flowing river. We have 6 low-head dams in Marion and Hamilton counties, and most of them provide a function for utilities and industries. So a low-head dam, it actually holds back water to raise those water levels to help improve municipal and industrial water supplies. However, they're also very dangerous because they create these recirculating currents and these large hydraulic forces, and they prevent people and fish and wildlife from navigating our river. But other cities, like Dayton and Grand Rapids and Bend, Oregon, have successfully solved this challenge by converting their low-head dams to a series of these rapid-like steps that still provide that necessary utilitarian function, but also allow these dams to be passable by humans and fish. Our second principle is to enhance community stewardship of the river's health by increasing opportunities for meaningful, lasting connections and experiences that add to the value of the quality of life of our residents. And so this is just one example. It's called Stored Potential, and it's this massive art installation that's affixed to these abandoned grain silos in Omaha, Nebraska. And the art tells the story of land use and food and agriculture. And Omaha hosts these massive harvest dinners for the community at the base of the silos. And it's a really incredible way to connect people and the land and food. The third principle is to increase year-round activities that attract people to the river for art and entertainment, recreation, gathering, and learning. We believe it's important to recognize the value of engaging and activating the river year-round, not just during the warmer months. The more year-round reasons that we give people to make the river a part of their daily lives, the more that people will understand and value it. So this is the Lawn on D in Boston, Massachusetts. It's in their waterfront district. And this is a winter event where they bring out chairs and fire pits, and there's hot chocolate and s'mores stations. And despite the cold, people really embrace this community event. So, since we're on the topic of events and activities, here is trivia question number 3. Which park, located along the White River, hosts an annual outdoor concert called Rock the Ruins? A, Broad Ripple Park, B, Riverside Park, C, Holiday Park, or D, Southwest Way Park? Again, please tweet your answer. The next principle is to draw people to, along, and into the river, and to create vibrant experiences that bring people together. So as you can see, this is glamping on Governor's Island in New York. And it's an opportunity for people to get away from the city, to connect with the land and the people, and to watch the sunset over the Statue of Liberty and see the glittering lights of Manhattan. The fifth principle is based upon respecting and building upon the river's unique historic identity, to invite people in and help them to understand and appreciate the river's stories. There is a reason that Indianapolis grew and developed along the river. And the river served as a platform for humanity. And it has a lot of stories to tell. In downtown Minneapolis, along the Mississippi River, is Mill Ruins Park. And this was actually several former flour mills that were abandoned. And the city turned these ruins into an interpretive park to help teach and share an important part of Minneapolis's industrial heritage. Principle number 6 encourages us to expand the river's role in our everyday lives and to build regional economic strength and community identity. The White River is a valuable asset, and it can be used to implement programming and creative placemaking, like you see pictured here, and it can be used to promote inclusive redevelopment to support the local economy and the quality of life. The 7th principle is to partner across boundaries to collaboratively manage the White River system and to create efficient operations and sustainable governance. It's important to remember that our waterways don't just stop at county lines. Our goal is to not only be excellent stewards of the river, but to also create destinations and experiences that complement each other rather than compete. Partnering on this plan, this is Brenda Myers from Hamilton County Tourism. Partnering on this plan has been just this really amazing start, but it must be sustained and it must be carried forward for decades. Principle 8 is to celebrate the diversity of the region's communities on the river and to preserve places for everyone for generations to come. There is a quilt of communities that line the banks of the White River, and we must always be mindful and attentive to our neighborhoods. As we work to create a healthy and a vibrant river, it's imperative that we understand the river's impact on our communities and that we diligently work to create strong, healthy, and sustainable neighborhoods. And the last principle states, balance community sentiments with long-term aspirations that honor ownership and use patterns along the river. The key word is balance. A generational plan should not be limited by what's in place today. But at the same time, we have to respect and work with what we do have today. The beautiful thing about developing a 58-mile plan is that it truly does provide opportunities for each and every person. There will be areas that it is completely and totally appropriate for economic development, like the former GM stamping plant. And there are areas where it's not appropriate or even feasible. The river means different things to different people, and we must always be mindful of that and strive for balance. So there's one site, thanks to the Lilly Endowment, that will see some change in the near future. And that brings me to trivia question number 4. The question reads, name the memorial located in Riverside Park along the White River that just received over $9 million from the Lilly Endowment so that it can be renovated and used by the Indianapolis Shakespeare Company for annual performances. Again, tweet your answer to My White River. So how do you plan for 58 miles of the White River? I'm going to admit that is a challenge because it's a huge distance. But when we looked at how the river flows and how it functions throughout the specific geographies, we realized that the river's character varies a lot. So we broke the river down into these character zones, or what we call river reaches. And within those reaches are hundreds of opportunities, both big and small. And each of those matters. But we can't realistically plan in detail for all 58 miles of the river. So we selected 7 areas that represent this spectrum of possibilities, from the natural to the suburban to the village to the urban. And we did a deep dive into those 7 areas, but with a lens that those types of developments could be used elsewhere up and down the river based on its character. So due to time limitations, I'm just going to share a few of those that are located in Indianapolis. And the first area that we looked into was the Clearwater area up near Keystone, around 465 and 96th Street. And it's truly an area that's a crossing in many ways. It's where our counties come together, it's a major transportation corridor, and a regional mixed-use suburban center. And the White River flows right through this area. And thousands of people cross over it every day, and yet most people have no idea that it's even there. It's kind of a poster child for how we've turned our back on the river. In many places, it's walled off by overgrown invasive species or by commercial service drives and dumpsters. So this is an example of River Road. It's just south of 465 and where it crosses over the White River today. And this is what we imagine it could be. So as office parks redevelop, we should encourage developers to embrace the river and make it front and center. We should encourage transformative development patterns that help activate the river while also serving commercial, office, and retail desires. Our goal is to increase both pedestrian and recreational connectivity while also providing open views and better physical access to the river. The next area that we dove into was Broad Ripple Village. And even though the river runs right through the village, most people associate Broad Ripple with the canal. So we looked at connectivity and infrastructure in Broad Ripple, looking at how we could link Holiday Park and Broad Ripple Park. We also studied how we could enhance the existing infrastructure and encourage future development to embrace the river. So this is an image of Broad Ripple today, where the river meets the canal, and it's pretty, but it's also very passive, and there's very little access to the water. So what if some of those parking lots were replaced by sidewalk cafes and patios overlooking the river and the canal? What if we restored the riverbanks and the marshes and created overlooks and access points? What if you could actually pull your boat up or your kayak and actually access the village by the water? And the last area that I'm going to share with you today is in downtown Indianapolis. And this is the most highly populated and dense area in Indianapolis. And because of that, it's also the most protected, meaning it has a lot of flood wall infrastructure. And the area that we chose to dive into was from around Riverside Park on the north, down to around the GM stamping plant and Lucas Oil Stadium on the south. And for the sake of this exercise, we really dove into this area around 16th Street near the Emmericksville Dam. So by pooling water back, this dam not only provided recreational opportunities for Riverside Park, but it also provided a necessary pool for the city's emergency water supply. So we wanted to see if and how this dam could be modified to allow for safe passage by people and wildlife. And this is what we imagine it could be. This is what it could look like if we converted the former dam to a series of rapid-like steps. It would still perform the exact same functions, but be safe for people and fish to traverse. We imagine restoring the prairies and marshes and providing opportunities for river observation and access. And that concludes my presentation for today, and I'm going to open it up for questions in just a minute. Today, you've learned a little bit about Indianapolis's history, the planning process, and hopefully you were inspired by some of the opportunities that we have up and down the river. But even more so, I hope that I've imparted some of my passion, not just for this project, but for the river itself. Although you may not feel a deep connection with the river, because again, as a city, we have done a really good job of turning our backs on the White River for more than a century. Your relationship with the river is way more intimate than you may ever realize. It literally hits you in the face when you take a shower, and it flows throughout your body when you take a sip of water. I'm optimistic that when you leave here today, you'll feel more connected to the river and become a passionate steward of this waterway, and that you help protect it so that it can be transformed and we can realize its enormous potential to serve as a vital link between our communities and a vibrant destination for this region. I hope that you take the opportunity to embrace it and to care for it so that it can be the river that you want it to be, and that it is everything that future generations could ever hope for. Thank you.